Welcome to Illuminati Silver. We tell you the truth about silver. Today is Wednesday, the 15th of February 2017. And we are publishing our second part of our interview with Greg. On this occasion, we are discussing Brexit and its impact on the UK and the rest of the world and its implications. We hope you enjoy this video and just remind you of the birds tweeting in the background. Unfortunately, they are extremely vocal, similar to those in the EU complaining about the UK's Brexit. Before we play you this tape, we would like to add that there is a slight error a few minutes in, whereby Greg makes the comment that he believed Brexit was a great folly on economic grounds. He actually meant to use the term the European Union or what was then the EEC, which becomes clear from the following sentences. But as we have not spliced or cut this tape in any way and have actually played it from beginning to end, that correction needs to be exemplified in advance. Well, that, Greg, brings us very nicely onto the issue of Brexit. Now, the political aspect of this aside, do you think Brexit will be good economically for Britain? Because we hear the governor of the Bank of England and we hear the IMF and we hear the World Bank saying that Britain's growth has been and will be adversely affected because of Brexit. What's your opinion?
Well, firstly, I question whether the Governor of the Bank of England has Britain's best interests at heart when you think that there is every possibility that at the end of his term he will be returning to Canada and making a ploy of his own to run Canada. Therefore, he will be trying to make friends with as many countries in Europe as he can, with a view to Canada's long-term relationship with the countries of Europe. Secondly, you mentioned the IMF. The IMF's present boss has recently been found guilty of fraud running to millions. And the previous boss was found guilty of sexually abusing hotel staff. So I see that neither of them as great examples to be quoted. But to treat your question in the manner which I believe you meant it, is it good for the country on purely economic grounds? I believe that Brexit was a great folly on economic grounds that was entered into at a moment of extreme weakness under poor leadership which actually admitted that they lied to the British public, and Ted Heath actually stated he had deliberately and wittingly lied to the British public because had they known the truth, they would not have voted in favour of remaining in the European Union. The reason that these pusillanimous politicians of the time wanted to join the European Union was twofold. One, it meant they could abrogate on their responsibility of what was needed at the time, which was to pull Britain around from a period of over-union interference, strikes and discontent, where a strong leader, similar, whether you loved her or hated her, to Margaret Thatcher, would have been able to make that change of the views and behaviour that Ted Heath quite clearly couldn't, and at that stage Harold Wilson was already suffering from early onset Alzheimer's. And the next leader was Callaghan, who was very busy enriching himself at the expense of his office, something I fear for America at the moment. Therefore, having accepted that we were dishonestly taken into the European Union, very much as a milch cow, where we seem to have paid for an awful lot of things and gained singularly little from our membership, I believe that in the very short term, it will have very little effect leaving. In the slightly longer term, it's going to be a difficult period for Britain while we finalise relationships with the European Union, who will do almost everything in their power to make it difficult for us, for two reasons. One, fundamentally, they have never forgiven Britain for our part in saving Europe from being overrun by Nazi Germany. And secondly, because we have always had contacts around the world. This, of course, has not made us very popular with some leaders in America. And I well remember when I lived in the Middle East in the 50s, America was doing almost anything to destabilise the oil at the time, which was controlled in the main by Britain. The raison d'etre behind that was they felt that they had been involved in a great European war, at the end of which Britain still had an empire, whereas America had gained no territory. So clearly, in my opinion, Brexit will not be damaging in the very short term, because there will be a great deal of excitement and exuberance that will carry us through that once it starts really happening. It will be damaging, and it will be a very difficult period as we adjust at the latter end of negotiations and when we first come out, which could be harmful to our economy. We could have a period where we have to tighten our belts, but it will be a period that we can overcome. And in the long term, I have absolutely no doubt that leaving the European Union is the right thing to do in economic terms, in commercial terms, in political terms, and in terms of peace on this planet. That is probably the most important consideration of all.
Well, you mentioned peace, but some people claim that it was the existence of the EU infrastructure that has maintained the peace since the Second World War.
This has been a very popular lie put forward in Europe. It is utter bunkum. There isn't one whit of documentary proof of it, and there isn't a single example where Europe has kept the peace anywhere. And its behaviour in the former Yugoslavia shows beyond doubt that peace was not its aim or its achievement. Peace in Europe has not been kept by the European Union because the European Union has had no coherent force with which to keep peace. Although now it is striving to set up a European army, it hasn't had a European army. It's been utterly dependent on NATO. And NATO has basically comprised Britain first, of course, because I'm British. But the power behind NATO has been
United States.
The United States,
yeah.
Without a doubt. And it has been the United States with, of course, Britain's guidance, that has maintained the peace.
But of course, President Trump has already said that he expects NATO members to pay their fair share, which he claims they haven't been doing so far. So do you actually see NATO changing in any great way, or members actually stumping up with the cash to pay for their fair share? And what will this actually do for American-EU relations, in your opinion?
It will be an unpopular view. However, Britain has endeavoured to pay its NATO dues and has stumped up the money even when it could least afford it. America has paid, just as America has all but funded the United Nations. Let's look at Germany. What has their contribution been to NATO? Well, the sum total of not a lot. And would you realistically expect the French to honour a commitment? Spain hasn't really participated at all. Italy, I don't think they've had much of a part in it. A few aeroplanes. Holland has made some efforts. But when it comes to peace, peace as prescribed by the Western world has been the United States of America, Britain, Canada, and some allies. One must not at this stage discount Turkey. Turkey has provided considerable air bases and considerable support up until its dalliance with Russia under Putin, where it can't really make up its mind whether Putin is their best friend or whether they ought to shoot their aeroplanes down. They are in a little bit of the muddle. But then again, the muddle being created in Syria, right on their border, is some justification for the extremist concerns that are going on in Turkey at the moment. As to the long-term relationship between America and the European Union, I personally don't think it's going to be good, because the French have all too often been willing to try and sabotage allies for the benefit of France. Germany has never really seemed to understand what an ally is. Italy, Spain and Greece can't afford allies, they haven't got any money. So I do think that the situation is going to prove difficult, and as the Chinese so wisely say, may you live in interesting times. It is one of their most normal curses.
Well, it's funny you mentioned China, because that's the next subject area I would like us to continue this conversation with. In the third part of our interview with Greg, we discuss the relationship between the United States and China, its potential future, and the importance, advantages and disadvantages of a gold-backed currency. We shall be playing this video in a couple of days' time. We hope you have found this video interesting and informative, and if so, please give it a thumb up and share it on Twitter. Also, kindly visit our website at illuminatisilver.com, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe as a free member for regular email updates and offers. Our Facebook page, which is updated daily, can be found at facebook.com/illuminatisilver. Disclaimer. Illuminati Silver owners come from a background of banking, international wealth management and economics. Having now retired from these worlds, we are not qualified to give investment advice. Therefore, this and other productions must not be deemed to be giving such advice, and merely represent the personal views of its owners.